whatever you have will morph into something that is consistent with what your beliefs are about the market.
Two traders, Darren and Walter, pull back the curtain on profitable trading systems, consistent money management, and profitable psychological triggers. Welcome to the Two Traders Podcast.
Welcome to the Two Traders Podcast. It's Walter here. I've got Darren on the line. And Darren, today you want to talk about gifted children.
Yeah. I read an article this week about gifted children. And, whenever I read anything that's kind of psychology or human behaviour based, I'm always kind of looking for the trader link within that. And here's the interesting thing about gifted children. Let's take a sort of 5-year-old who's an amazing pianist. You'd imagine that they'd go on and grow up to be like great composers or the next Mozart. And the funny thing is that very rarely happens. And it's not just in music; it's also in sport, science, mathematics. What is going on that if someone's amazing at something at the age of 4, 5, or 6, then why, when they mature, are they not actually becoming the new Mozart or Beethoven? And what they reckon, what they found was that gifted children, their parents, because the kids have this gift, the parents tend to kind of be really strict with them and give them lots of rules. And what happens is they come sort of brilliant at copying what's already known, but they kind of lose that sort of creative thinking edge because they're kind of given too many rules and restricted. And the other interesting thing they found was the kids that do go on to be very original and come up with new ideas and really sort of change the game, if you like, when they look at their parents, they were very relaxed with rules and kind of let the kids do what they were into, what their passion was. And obviously you can see the sort of parallels with trading, and it's why I'm always saying that I really don't like too many rules in trading, although you kind of need to have like a structure to work around. It's really understanding the part each of those rules play in the outcome with trading. So as an example, let's say on my intraday trading, I don't trade in the Asian session, and to do that I have an indicator that starts at 10 p.m. and finishes at 7 a.m. and I get lots and lots of questions about exactly what time the indicator should stop. And I think that is kind of people's desire to find like precise rules because they think that will affect the outcome, whereas really they're kind of missing the point. It's more of just sort of a loose structure to work around, and then you kind of have to let your creative side and your imagination come into trading as well. So yeah, that's it. I just thought it was really sort of fascinating because you would think, and when we come to trading as well, you think, okay, this guy's got a financial background, he's got a degree, he's really intelligent, then he'll definitely be a good trader, and he's very disciplined and he's got all his rules laid out. And obviously that isn't the case. So there's kind of like some parallels there.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great topic, and I'm glad that you're bringing this up. I have been thinking a lot, actually, over the last week about creativity, and as ironic as it sounds, I've actually been trying to structure my thinking around, okay, if I wanted to say to someone, this is how you become more creative, what are the rules? Which I know sounds totally counterintuitive. Or what's the structure? What's a process? What are things that you can hang your hat on and try and encourage that? And I think you've nailed it, because what the schooling system is all about in most countries, it's basically, when you think about it, it's basically about breaking your children. You're breaking them in. You're making sure they understand what they should do in society, and they're basically following the rules. And the very best of those students who are able to follow the rules to a T, they're the ones that are rewarded, right? Those are the ones that get the scholarships and that. I mean, don't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the way our education system works, is to, reward the results rather than looking at the whole thought process that went into it and the effort they put in, and, how they perhaps, try to look outside the box. All those things are not considered, never mind added to the final score. And I think that's a mistake.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where it's even difficult to see it when it's happening because you're inside of it. And as a trader, you're probably using assumptions that you haven't thought about, that you do a good job of this, Darren. You question those, really. I mean, that's kind of where creativity starts. It's this idea of bringing something over, like an idea from a totally different field, a totally different realm, and bringing it into your realm. For example, a lot of traders are probably familiar with the 2% rule or the 1% rule or whatever particular book or guru says to do. You can only risk 1% or 2%. There are some really good profitable systems where if you do that, you will lose money. And likewise, there are funds. A friend of mine, actually, he went to go apply to trade for a fund, and they said to him, are you prepared to risk 10% per trade? And he said, no chance, because he risked much less than 1% per trade, and that's what he was used to. And they said, well, then we don't think you're ready to become a professional trader. And he's very, very successful, but their box is one of being very aggressive, using high probability win systems, and they're trying to maximize returns with little regard to the drawdown. So I think these sorts of ideas that come up, I mean, I have a couple of data points that I'd like to share with the listeners because I think this is relevant to this discussion, and then I'd like to see what you think about this. Okay, so number one, these are three things that come to mind when I hear this. So one is that I had a really good friend in university, and he was by all accounts brilliant and was very, had a photographic memory, was brilliant with maths from a young age. And in fact, some of our professors in university, they actually sort of made joking side bets about which of us, because we both had decided that we were going to go on to graduate school, which of us would do better in graduate school. And the consensus was that he could do whatever he wanted to do. Now, in the end, he's bounced around from different jobs. He didn't finish graduate school, which I don't consider to be a failure, but by a lot of measures, you would say that he hasn't quite found his way. He hasn't found his niche. He hasn't found the thing that he's really good at yet, right? And so it's interesting because the difference really in personality between my friend and myself was more that I was like, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to make it happen. Right? And I was just super determined, even though I probably didn't have all of the advantages that he had. He was a lot more lax and not as driven, I suppose you could say. And maybe that's the key difference. When you're talking about two people who want the same thing in life, one of them maybe doesn't quite do as well as the other simply because they've been able to coast through life on their, on being very gifted, being very intelligent, and being sort of that sort of person. So that could be another aspect. Another thing I want to bring up is there's two siblings, older brother, younger sister, and their parents had decided what their careers were going to be. So the one was going to be a lawyer and the other was going to be a doctor. So the sister was going to be the doctor and the brother was going to be a lawyer. Now, what ended up happening, the sister did really well in school and was bumped up a grade. So she was with her peers were a year older than her, basically, and in some cases a little bit more than that because she was bumped up a grade. And what ended up happening was the brother eventually followed the right path and did all, went to Harvard and Yale and all that, and did all that stuff and did the career and basically has locked into what his plan was, really set forth by his parents. And his sister did something different. She completely tapped out, didn't want to go to medical school, didn't want to do any of that, and has done some really interesting things in entertainment and has become like a voice actress, right? Because she has a really unique voice. So the interesting thing to me is how, if you were to look at the two, some people would say that the sister has achieved more or done more or had certainly probably potentially a more fulfilling life. because she didn't really follow the rules. And the brother has largely followed the rules, and you wouldn't really know him from any other lawyer. You know what I mean? Yet they were
a great lawyer, but
yeah, you know what I mean. So it's interesting. So, and the other thing I want to bring up is if you look back in history, this is the last data point. If you look back in history, what you'll find is the people who make the greatest contributions to a field in science or whatever, they've come from another discipline altogether. And that is across the board. You will see this. The real leaps made in physics, in biology, even in psychology, have come from people who approached it from a slightly different angle because they weren't indoctrinated into the truths and the rules and the laws of that field. So I find that fascinating too. So those are the things that come to mind when we're talking about being tagged as someone who's really got good things going. You know, you're kind of like you say, Darren, you're sort of set, your course is set for you, you're gifted, you're very intelligent, you're beyond the curve, you're an outlier, those sorts of things. I think that perhaps, as you say, some of the biggest contributors to society and different fields are those who didn't necessarily know that that's what they were going to do when they were at such a young age.
Yeah, I think in the first point you made, I imagine that guy went on to do what he felt he should do based on the pressure of being gifted and being talented. He probably felt a great deal of pressure to deliver in that field. And in this study, what they found was that great pianists and great tennis players didn't have amazing tennis coaches or amazing piano teachers. But what they did find was they were doing it because they really loved tennis and they really loved playing the piano. So it wasn't that they necessarily had a gift. It was more that they had a passion for it, really. And then that could grow into something creative. And, what they're saying is that with people who really innovate and excel in certain things, they don't just know about that thing that they're excelling in. They tend to have really broad knowledge of other things as well, and that kind of compounds their abilities in a specific subject. They found this. Here's a little some stats from the article. They Nobel Prize winners 22 times more likely to perform as actors, dancers or magicians, 12 times more likely to write poetry, plays or novels, and 7 times more likely to dabble in arts and crafts. And they tend to play instruments and compose music as well. So to be a really great thinker, you kind of have to have a breadth of knowledge. And going back to the sort of trading thing again, this is why I try to explain to people when they sort of ask me about specifics of my strategy. I try and say, don't really focus on that. Just kind of look at the big picture of what I'm doing and then just kind of play with it. I remember, we had that podcast discussion about rules, and I was kind of saying, no, throw all the rules out and do something crazy. And not necessarily because that is, going to be the thing that works, but because you'll learn a lot about what you've already been doing and the possibilities and the limitations of that by taking on new ideas. And I see it all the time with traders there. They seem to become very close-minded quickly. They kind of buy into one idea and they find it very difficult to kind of move out of the boundaries of that. And I think just a little bit of creative thinking, even if you eventually go back to trading how you were, I think you'll probably be able to excel at it at a greater level if you do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that one of the things that may happen for some traders, and you see this on the forums around the internet, you'll see people just dig into others and talk about why that won't work and so forth. But I think one of the things that comes up is that if you're vulnerable, if you're in a position where you feel like if this is one thing that I use in terms of thinking, like really take an idea and take it to the max if you want to see what the outcome of that idea is. So let's say my idea here is basically this: if you're really vulnerable, you're more open to authority, right? So let's say that you've been you've been diagnosed with cancer, which is awful, right? Well, if that happens, you're going to look to authority to see, okay, what do I have to do here? Let's get rid of this. Let's get healthy again, And that's much more likely than if you were to get a hangnail. Right? If you're to get hangnail, no. The way that I get rid of hangnails is I just soak them in vinegar for 5 minutes, or that's how my grandma taught me. I don't care what you have to say about that, right? I mean, that's the kind of thinking. And the same thing with trading. If you've been burned, if you've lost a lot of money, if you've repeatedly just been at your wit's end because you haven't been able to make it work, you're much more likely to look to someone and go, well, that makes sense to me. He does pretty well. I guess I'll just do exactly what he does. So in a way, you can see why people would become so dogmatic about it and want to know exactly what the rules are, especially if they've been to that place where it's so painful and so difficult for them to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And so one of the things I would like to follow up your point. So you're saying, look at the big idea, look at the framework. This is what I'm presenting, which is basically this idea for one of your trading systems, which is when the market goes far, and makes some nice moves, you can make money quite easily, really. And if the market's not really going anywhere, it's just kind of beep, 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 chop, 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 that sort of thing, it might be a little bit more difficult to make money. And so that's basically the idea, right? I mean, am I being unfair here?
No, that's exactly correct. And I think essentially all trading systems are doing that.
Yeah.
But they perhaps, pad it out a little bit more.
Exactly, yeah. So, what you're saying to them is essentially what I strongly believe, which is, look, this is a framework that I'm going to offer you, which is you can make money, and this is how I do it, when the market moves and makes these, swings up and swings down and does this and does that. And then this is what happens when it doesn't move and it kind of gets really tight and it's in a restricted range. It's not really moving very much. Those aren't going to be very good times for me and when I'm trading this system. But it's up to you to basically decide how you're going to use this seed of an idea to make it work for you. And that's something that I really strongly believe everyone listening to this podcast should recognize, that you are going to trade your beliefs. I don't care whose trading system, I don't care who taught it to you, I don't care how many checklists you have, spreadsheets and data and all this backtesting stuff. Whatever you have will morph into something that is consistent with what your beliefs are about the market. So when we try and kid ourselves by saying, I'm just going to copy what Darren does, or I'm just going to copy what trader Marissa does. If you're going to follow Marissa, or if you're going to follow Darren, just know that there will come a day when that system is either morphed into something completely different to what Darren uses or Marissa uses, or you're going to give up on it and look for something else, something, quote, better. So that's really kind of the point, I think, to me. And then so if you're creative, if you're open to these ideas, so like you say, if you've got these creative outlets, if you're able to draw on information from completely unrelated fields like genetics, and you're using genetics in the way that you construct your trading system, these sorts of things mean that you're using something that's true to what you believe and what you know. And it's much more likely that you'll trade that for a long time and do well with that for a long time than if you're so dogmatic and trying to approach trading as you would, accounting 101 at university and trying to get a good mark in your accounting course. So to me, I guess that's the take home message about this. Darren, what are your sort of final thoughts?
Final thoughts really. Just be open-minded and don't buy into rules too easily. Question them all and think about the market. Step back and think about the market in much simpler terms. Like you always said, think about it like a child would. If you asked a child that this is a game and you need to buy and sell, sweets to make more sweets, and think how they would think about it. And don't let your thinking get bogged down with rules which often are just other people's opinions.
Yeah, well said. Thanks for your time, Darren. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Okay, Walter. Cheerio, mate.